Now, in studio, I'm joined by international news editor Sophie Mokoena to unpack what Namibia has said and also other developments within these ICJ hearings. Sophie, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. So last month, Namibia made a significant point in which they condemned strongly Germany's decision to support Israel in this particular war at the ICJ. I mean, let's unpack what transpired today then in terms of Namibia's submissions, starting off with the Justice Minister, interestingly paying tribute to the late former President Hage Geingob, and of course, what else has been said today?
Well, you know that just before the passing on, President Geingob, on behalf of the Namibian government, issued a very strong statement and rebuked the Germans after the government there took a decision to go public to say they are going to support Israel. Namibia reminded Germany that you have forgotten you committed a genocide in this country. The Second World War revolved around you again. Now you are again supporting a situation where we see that there are trends that can lead to genocide. And by doing that, Namibia was the first African country to do that and come out strong. Unfortunately, at that time, President Geingob was not feeling well, but he saw it fit to take a stand. When I spoke to the former president of Mozambique yesterday, Joaquim Chissano, one thing that he spoke about in relation to President Geingob was that he fought against discrimination. And he was totally against oppression. And therefore, it is no surprise that he took that stand when other powerful countries were criticizing South Africa for using legal means to try and settle a dispute with Israel where they don't agree on what's happening in Gaza. Now, the Minister of Justice of Namibia did just that to pay tribute to the fallen hero of SADC who stood up to support the SADC country using the example of Namibia. Today, the presentation, as you heard, centered around Namibia as a case study when it was oppressed and violated by the apartheid regime, where the United Nations even took a decision to support Namibia, and Namibia was given an observer status at the UN, while South Africa was declared a apartheid system, a crime against humanity. And therefore, drawing the parallel to that, in the same way you treated us, please do the same with the Palestinians, because the case is similar. Even the measures you imposed, the decisions you took, and in line with the Geneva Convention, the Genocide Convention, but also the UN Convention, because you know that the League of Nations, before the United Nations, any country could join. But the United Nations, to ensure that we are able to manage the conflicts around the world, because the main objective was to ensure maintenance of peace and no war again. There were prescripts in terms of who must join the UN. One other issue that is clear in the UN Convention is that you cannot be an aggressor, you cannot be an apartheid state, or you can't discriminate. But here is Israel being a member of the United Nations and doing exactly that.
And on that point, I mean, importantly, Professor Phoebe Okoa was trying to reference, the point that Israel must bear the consequences. And that, I think, essentially was largely what her statements was, or submissions was. Just maybe one or two highlights from her presentation, and then just take us through in terms of what is going to then happen today in terms of other presentations and tomorrow.
Reparation. As you know that even in this case of Namibia, Germany has agreed on a reparation process, even though they haven't agreed on terms and how to do it. the decision by Namibia to say there must be reparations for 5 decades, stemming from 5 decades, to Palestinians who have suffered. Secondly, dismantle the settlement, move away, stop those policies where you are suppressing the Palestinians. And then going forward, we expect Qatar to take a position and make a submission just before 2. And I think Qatar's submission is very important because today, as we speak, last night, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu finally agreed that a delegation from Israel must go to Paris, as we speak, to go and engage in the ceasefire talks. And therefore, as we speak in France, we expect Qatar to facilitate those talks with other countries such as Egypt, the United States of America, and of course Israel. And therefore, it will be important to hear what Qatar is going to say, because it will give us an insight of what's likely going to happen in France today. And the last important one, I think, later today, the United Kingdom. It will be interesting to hear what the UK is going to say. We saw when there was that vote on Algeria resolution, where America vetoed the resolution.
For the 3rd time.
The UK didn't veto, even though it has got veto powers. France didn't veto either. UK abstained. And if US didn't veto, that resolution could have seen the light of the day. And therefore you can see UK is now trying to strike a balance. And there's so much pressure in Parliament, in the United Kingdom, where even the Prime Minister is now struggling. And remember, he wants to be re-elected. The same with the Americans. Biden is under pressure and he wants to be re-elected. And therefore it will be interesting to hear what the United Kingdom, a friend of Israel, will say, but trying to strike a balance.
And I'm glad you mentioned that last point, because I think it's important to know how useful this process that's currently happening in the ICJ is going to be, because a lot of talks are around, will Israel then come to the table as they start talking about a 2-state solution? But Sophie, thank you so much for your time and, of course, unpacking those developments there. That is SABC International News Editor Sophie Mokoena.